was talking to Mayo during his, I don't think it was during his interview, but just when I was up there. He's like, yeah, one of the tactics I can use to determine like who I'm not going to be compatible friends with is people that quote Anchorman and Dodgeball.
If they quote it, you will or will not be.
Well, he will not be friends with them.
Oh, that's funny.
Damn, that shit's fucked up.
I was hanging out, not hanging out, I was working with these guys at this company, and there were like 3 of them. We were doing this volunteer day. We were pulling weeds out behind this like Fisher house, like a Ronald McDonald house for vets. Mm-hmm. And the 3 of them just were like, all right, movie quotes, go. And they went back and forth for, I kid you not, for 15, 20 minutes. And they would quote like Anchorman.
I can't do that shit. My mind doesn't work like
what's
that.
What's the Dodgeball one with Ben Stiller?
Dodgeball.
Meet the Fox. They were just quoting like all these comedy movies. It was like comedy greatest hits, and each one of them knew like they could quote it, and the other guys would go, old school, love that scene. That's my boy. You're my boy, Blue. And they're just like going off. I'm sitting there. I'm like, what the fuck? Like,
were they cool guys?
Like, they're pretty cool. I mean, they're like corporate U.S.
I think
guys.
that's exactly
like,
what
Mayo was talking about.
Was referring to. It was like that kind of guy.
Yeah, they're like.
It's like a very standard guy.
Guys.
Yeah, guys.
guys.
All right, let's get into it.
All
right, Sam Rioux. Take us through let's just start from the beginning. So give us a brief overview. That's a good fitting point. We're sitting here in Maine at the cozy harbor of Maine. Your home state. We just visited your parents yesterday. First time I've ever met them, which is kind of shocking. Give us an overview of your essentially life story from birth till now. Take as much or as little time as you need.
Let's see, 1988.
88?
It was 1988.
I guess that's right. I'm 32, right?
August.
Oh, yeah, and happy birthday, by the way. He turned 30. Sam turned 30 yesterday. That's all very
30 years and one day ago.
Mm-hmm.
1988, August. Sam Rioux was born and the world changed. No, this is fitting. We're at, it sounds nice when you call it the Cozy Harbor.
I think we're behind like a fish processing plant.
Yeah.
Smells like it at least.
We're in beautiful Portland, Maine. I can see some nice wooden sailboats out there.
Yeah.
But we are tucked in between the Marine Trade Center, which is like cranes and it's very industrial, and some like laminate tin building, settled somewhere in between a beautiful view of a harbor and like
I'll get a picture of
a beautiful view of like a river inlet. But we picked the least scenic spot to do this, which is kind of nice. I think that's sort of that's a highlight there. So I was born 30 plus years ago now, and grew up for the first about 10 years or so of my life in Bar Harbor, Maine, which had a beautiful national park, Acadia National Park, right there. So that was like my backyard, was mountains and the one sandy beach in the middle of Maine, and called Sand Beach. And for real. There's one beach with sand on it. We called it Sand Beach. And that's like what I think of as my childhood. And then we moved when I was in like second grade to Holden, Maine, which is where Alex joined me for dinner yesterday for my birthday.
Lobster bake,
first ever for Al. Like 112. How do you say?
112 for you.
For me. It's not an exact
Fucking
count.
delicious though. That was seriously my first time ever eating lobster and clams. And what was the other thing we ate? We ate clams,
mussels,
right? Clams, mussels, and lobsters.
Yeah, that was really good. And corn on the cob.
Let me interject here real quick. So you grew up in Bar Harbor. I don't know how many listeners are familiar with Maine. It's a pretty sparsely populated state to begin with. Portland's the biggest city, right? Like we're in the metropolis of Maine right now?
Yeah, so we're in the biggest city, and I think it's somewhere around 200,000 people in the city of Portland. Bar Harbor, maybe 10,000 people. Tourists coming through Acadia National Park, a little over 1 million people a year now, I think.
Yeah.
And then my family moved from Bar Harbor up to Holden, Maine, which is just outside of Bangor. And Bangor's 25,000 people, and that's like probably one of the,
Wait, they moved so you went from Bar Harbor to Holden, then to Bangor?
Bar Harbor to Holden. Well, Holden and Bangor. Holden's almost a suburb of Bangor.
Okay.
If it
so you never lived in Bangor?
If Holden were a suburb, it would be a suburb of Bangor. But it's like rural Maine.
So there's like a lot of forest outside of Bangor, and that's called Holden.
Yeah, in the woods. In the woods. We lived in the woods outside of Bangor.
No, dude, seriously. So we went to Sam's house. We came out to Maine a few days ago. Me, Sam, my younger sister, Sam's best friend from childhood, Haley, and then Sam's best friend from college, a good friend of mine now, Jordan, who was a previous podcast guest. And we came up a couple days ago in Maine, spent the day in Portland, my first time up this part of the country. And then we crashed in Camden.
Yep.
Camden 2 days ago, which is like a real picturesque sailing town. Like, seems very Kennedy-esque. And then yesterday, for Sam's birthday, for Sam's 30th, we rolled up to Holden, where he grew up. And y'all, it's like Sam grew up in the fucking woods, like in the woods. And it's your dad, like, yeah, it really does feel like a cabin in the woods. And I knew this prior, like you've told me this before, but it was actually even more rustic than I anticipated it was going to be. Yeah. And didn't your dad build that house like himself?
Yeah. So actually, I guess that's an interesting part of my story, maybe.
Let's hear it.
So when we were in second grade, my dad had been traveling from Bar Harbor up to Bangor for work. So he was working in a hospital in Bangor, but we were living over an hour away in Bar Harbor, and it was crazy during like snow and ice storms in the winter. So my parents had started looking for property closer to the hospital in Bangor, and they found this piece of land, and my dad had wanted to build a house. So he went and did this house frame building course or whatever, construction course, and learned how to build post and beam houses. So in our house, there are these like massive wooden beams that are exposed, and you can see them, and they make like those triangular joints. So it looks kind of like a cabin, but you can Google post and beam. It's like, especially for old like New England barns and stuff, you'll see a lot of them with this kind of construction. So my dad learned how to do that and like design the house, like drew up blueprints and stuff, and then worked with a framing company and had some guys come and actually help build the frame. And then, I think a plumber, helped with plumbing, and then some electrician came in. But everything inside the house, the flooring, the walls, all the little details like light fixtures and like outlets and all that stuff, he pretty much did himself. Right. And it was a way bigger project. It was the first house he's ever built.
Oh, really? That ended up being like more than he thought it was going to bit off a little more than he could
believe it or not, it's a lot to build a house.
Shelter for you and your family.
So by the time that my parents had sold the house that we were living at in Bar Harbor, the other house, the house they're in now, was not finished. Right. And it was the middle, I guess it was maybe towards the beginning of the school year, but we had to like move up. We had to move out of the house that was sold. Someone was going to move into it, and we had to move to Holden. So we were like sleeping on mattresses in the floor of like what is the living room, and now, but it was my sister and I. And
how old were you at the time?
Briefly, my parents' bedroom. I was around 10, so I thought it was.
Oh shit! So you remember this?
Yeah, so I thought it was a pretty cool camping trip.
Little did you know, like.
But it was like a permanent.
You and your family were teetering on the verge of death.
It was like a permanent camping trip where the campsite just kept getting better and better, slowly but surely.
So you're 10, and your sister, who's your only sibling, was.
My sister's 11.
11.
12. 12. I don't know.
What did you think? Like, was there any like rebellion on y'all's part? Like, Dad, what the fuck are you doing?
Man, I thought it was like probably the coolest adventure ever. Obviously, like I missed my little kindergarten friends from Bar Harbor, but
you seem like you must have been pretty delayed 10-year-old kindergartner.
Oh yeah, I was slow, man. Okay, so I was probably closer to what, 7 or 8? Okay. Going to second grade. What's that?
Yeah, you choose like subtract 5 years from your age. So if you were 7 or 8, you were in second, third grade.
Okay. There's a teacher. See, I need some of those skills.
Damn right.
So I was 7 or 8. I thought Holden was awesome. We had like this big hill. There's sort of a cliff, like a ledge behind our house, a river or stream. If it felt like a river when I was small, it looks like a stream now. If you like go all the way down the hill behind our house, and you saw the house, it's like on this big hill.
It's beautiful. I mean, it's fucking beautiful.
So I had a blast when we first moved out. My dad gave me like a hatchet, and I would just go out and chop down trees because we had so many.
Mm-hmm.
And
is Bar Harbor though? Like, isn't Bar Harbor more of a town? Like, there's more going on there.
Bar Harbor is way more of a town.
So there was
way more. Of a
I guess
town.
when you're 10 though, that's not that big of a deal transitioning from town to isolation.
Yeah, no, it's not like even in Bar Harbor. I mean, we had some neighbors, but like I wasn't right in the town of Bar Harbor. So like think about Camden. We stayed in at my coworker's place in Camden. Alex was up here with a couple other friends, and Camden's got like this small, like it's like a downtown area with these, like little shops and like boats on the water in the harbor, and there's like a school and a library and like the grocery store and a little restaurant. That's like Bar Harbor.
Okay, I got you.
But where I lived
it's a house in the woods.
Was also kind of a house outside of town. It was like where we were staying.
Right. Okay.
So there was the town.
Okay, so
there was the town a 5-minute drive away.
Right.
But we didn't have as many neighbors.
So you're accustomed to being a hermit.
Yeah, I was born and raised a hermit. Sam Rioux, born and raised a hermit.
Dude, what did you do when you were a kid, like for fun?
Oh, I played outside every day.
But by yourself?
I would play with my sister when I could get her to join me.
Okay.
Which wasn't all the time by any means.
So, like, what was your relationship between you and your sister? Like, were y'all super close or super not close? I don't know. Like, does it go? What does it go? It's your only person contact you have with someone your age, so you're super close, or you spend so much time with that person you like don't even want to see their face in the morning?
So we definitely had like an oscillating relationship.
Okay.
We would play together a lot when we were younger. The other thing you would do a lot of is like play dates or like go hang out with friends.
You got to schedule those in advance.
Yeah, you'd have to like do it with your friends and coordinate with your parents to get dropped off and picked up, and usually you do it for like either like all day or an overnight.
Right.
Because otherwise it was like, is it worth driving 45 minutes to see someone for an hour or two?
It's like watch the football game.
Might as well just go kick a soccer ball around in the woods.
Kick it against a tree and have it come back.
Yeah, man. I used to just go outside, and we had the little grassy area. Yeah. I used to just kick my soccer ball at a tree. I actually had this clump of four trees.
You're being serious right now.
I'm being serious. I'm dead serious. That's how I would practice my shots. I'd have like 3 or 4 soccer balls, and I would aim for a tree. And if it came back, I'd get another shot. So there was a real incentive to be good.
Yeah, man. So I so deadly accurate now on the
juggling, practice my dribbling. I rode bicycles a lot. By the time I was in middle school, I could easily ride 10 to 15 miles to visit my buddies on the other side of town. We'd meet up. We'd have a little bike gang. And sometimes we'd bike another 10 to 15 miles to go to the pool. So on a nice hot summer day, Sam might be biking, 12, okay, now I'm in 8th grade, so what's that?
Putting in 50 miles round trip to go see the pals and go take a dip in the pool?
Yeah, what's 8th grade? 8th grade, how old are you then? You're like 14?
Yeah, at 5, 13.
Yeah, so I'm 13, and I'm biking, let's say 20 miles to see my friends and go to the pool, and then 20 miles back. So I'm doing 40-mile bike rides just to like hang out and have a social life.
Dude, can you tell the story of, you told me the story relatively recently, within the last year, of like you like peering out your window, or like were you coming back from soccer practice one day or something and you saw some kid like riding a bike?
Yeah. So I did end up meeting a few friends on my street. So my town is, I lived in the town of Holden, but I lived on Upper Dedham Road. Okay. And Dedham was the town right next to us. Mm-hmm. So I lived quarter mile from the town line.
Okay, got you.
So 90% of the people on my street lived in the other town over.
Dedham, okay.
So I didn't go to school with them. I didn't socialize. I didn't even know they existed.
Oh, wow.
And I mean,
you can't see. You're not like coming in contact with them regularly.
And
he says he lives on their street. Like I grew up in a cul-de-sac. So like the kids, I grew up on a 1/10 of a mile long street, and there were 25 kids on that 1/10 of a mile block.
My street.
You're saying on a street, this is like a several mile long stretch is your street. Yeah. You're not like contacting these individuals on a regular basis.
So my street was 30 times as long as yours and had about the same amount of kids on it. Spread over, 30 times the length.
All hidden by trees.
All hidden by trees. No one's playing on the road.
Right,
We're not playing in the road. Cars are going 50, 60 miles an hour down that road.
Right, exactly.
And so we were coming back from soccer practice or something one day, and I saw these two kids out on bicycles, like, riding past my house, and I was like, oh.
Humans!
Kids my age. Like, I wonder who these guys are. I better figure it out. Maybe we've got some new friends in town.
Right.
And so I ran in, I grabbed my bike, I booked it down the hill, booked it up the road, and chased these motherfuckers down. And I was like, hey, y'all live around here? And
do y'all want to ride bikes together?
And they lived 2.5 miles away.
Which is like a next door neighbor.
Or 3 miles away. So I was like, you're my next door neighbors. This is tight. And we would meet up occasionally. We'd ride bikes around the neighborhood, and we'd throw rocks at each other and throw apples. We used to hide in this ditch next to this apple tree and throw apples at cars.
Oh damn! Okay, we did some of that too.
Yeah,
we do have some common ground here.
Oh man, whether you're living in a city or you're out in the middle of the woods, you're still harassing drivers.
Nothing like throwing object at cars.
Yeah, so that's when I met Blake and Corey. I just made up that second name. I can't remember the name. In case you're listening.
Blake and Drake. Cool, man.
That's when I met JT and Drake. My pals from Holden, Maine.
You don't even know your friends' names. Dude, the most astonishing thing to me, I have a couple more questions about growing up in the wilderness, but I think the single most astonishing to me is, and I was saying this to your friend Haley, who I just spent the last few days with as well, because she grew up in a town, I guess,
just like mine,
a nearby town, which is like 50 miles away, in the woods as well, right? And like seriously, y'all grew up like tens of miles away from each other, but went to the same high school.
Yeah.
Which to me, it's like within a 10-mile radius of my house that I grew up in, you've got like 10 high schools, right? So I was like, but both of y'all are so, in my mind, shockingly normal.
Oh, yeah.
And not even like normal.
It's because you're weird, dude. It's because you're like messed up, but.
No, but not even like normal, like you don't have any like you're not criminals or like deviants. Like you guys have like advanced social skills, you're extroverted people, like you're like above normal, like you're above average social beings. It's crazy to me. I don't understand how does that happen. Like how are you developing your social skills on a day? I guess at school, right? But then like during the summer you're like fucking talking to yourself in the woods, like kicking a soccer ball against a trunk of a tree.
I didn't talk to myself. I may have. I learned how to play all different sorts of social roles because I didn't have other friends to interact with. So it's very easy for me to
very malleable social
shift.
Creature.
Yeah, I was like, I had to be the bully, and I had to pick on myself. You got to do what you got to do.
Giving yourself a swirly.
Yeah, that was a rough day. I didn't want to see myself at home that day.
Dude, I don't know, man. I don't think there's like an answer to that, but it is just shocking to me how that fucking happens.
I mean, so once our middle school had probably about 30 kids in each grade, maybe a little bit more than that.
30 kids in each grade.
30 kids in each grade.
Wow.
Maybe
that's
40. Maybe 40 kids in each grade. So that's what? Like 160 kids total?
Do y'all have like homeroom classes or just like one class?
2 classes per grade. We had two classes per grade. It was around 20 kids a class.
I got you.
No, that can't be right. So it was 18 kids a class. I'm thinking about my 7th grade.
Okay.
It's like 18 kids a class, and we had 4 classes. So what's that?
Are y'all
54?
Y'all switching classes? Like you go into a different class there's like a science teacher, math teacher?
We started rotating in 6th grade.
And do you have like leveled classes? So like is there like an honors classes, and then like when you get to high school is there like AP and shit?
So they never.
Everyone's just kind of taking the same stuff.
They never formally leveled them, but everyone knew who the good teacher was and the bad teacher was.
And the good teacher had the smart kids, and the bad teacher had the stupid kids.
The kids that were disciplinary issues.
Oh, so it wasn't even an academic like assignments.
It was more like,
who's
we're
going to cause disruptions.
We're gonna give Miss Doyle the tough kids. And
because she's the bad teacher, or because she's the good teacher?
Because she would whip them into line.
That's good. I like that.
Miss Lucian was the bad teacher. Everyone knew that Miss Lucian was like not a good teacher.
So then all the kids that had the potential had the bad teacher.
Not always. Sometimes it worked out like that.
Okay.
But I think it was mostly around because I think at a rural school, the incentive is to keep the teacher.
Right.
More so than accelerate the student.
Got you. Keep the doors open.
I could be wrong, but they're like, no, we just need this thing to run.
Right, we need to keep these doors open.
We don't have another teacher.
But then when you went to high school, right, like it's like multiple of these towns in the woods combining together, right?
Yeah, so...
Explain that system, actually. That's an interesting system because you went to a private school, but you didn't pay for it. Explain all that.
Right. So, I was either thinking about making a joke or actually just explaining it. I'm going to explain it.
Okay, good.
I'll make the joke later. So the way the school system works, in Maine, there's a lot of...
Well, look at this guy right here.
Oh, man.
We got
an audience and he's calling for jokes.
Got a seagull about 10 yards from us howling at the top of his lungs.
Probably wants to...
Uh-oh.
Oh, we got a
second one flying in. He looks like he's trying to grab our attention, doesn't he?
Yeah, he was just looking right at us. He probably wants a French fry or something.
It's not happening.
Holy
Whoa,
shit.
fuck, it's happening. We're getting invaded, folks.
Have you seen the movie Birds?
We got 3 now. I think they want something from us. All right, let's try to keep the ball rolling.
We'll try to keep it. Oh my God, they look like little pterodactyls.
We're gonna have to escape here in a minute. They look aggressive.
So the school system.
Please tell us more about the Maine public education system.
It's a riveting conversation.
I find it interesting. Go ahead.
There's a bunch of small towns, and they don't have their own high schools because they just don't have a population big enough to support it, a taxpayer base for that. So high schools tend to be located either in bigger or slightly bigger cities, bigger towns, that have the tax revenue to actually support it, or they'll get a bunch of small towns and group them together and sort of make a preferred high school for those towns. So there might be 3 or 4 towns that group together. If you don't fall into one of those, I either live in the big town that has its own high school, or I live in the system that's already sort of put together a high school and everyone's going to feed into that, then you have what they call in Maine school choice.
Yeah.
And you can go to any school,
private or public.
That's awesome. In the state of Maine, and Maine will give you like an allocated amount of funds to go and attend that high school. And it's like I think it's based on the same amount of money is available for every student. I think it's around, I want to say $13,000, but I'm not positive what that like tuition voucher is.
So there's potential you would have to pay some tuition then.
So if you pick a private school that's like
$15,000.
Andover or Freiburg Academy.
Right.
It's like a private boarding school in Maine whose tuition is probably more expensive than that $13,000. You might have to pay a little bit additional.
But that wasn't the case for you.
But basically you can go anywhere. So the school I went to was in the town of Bangor. It wasn't Bangor Public High School. It was John Baptist Memorial High School, which was a private school but had a bunch of students who weren't paying to go there, but were from these small towns all around the area and went there because John Baptist's sort of mission was, it's a college preparatory high school. We want, people who are planning on attending a 4-year school and
we want the cream of the crop.
Smartest people I've ever met. You've met a bunch of people from John Baptist. You've met Anders, Haley, myself. That might be it.
They're all sharp.
Probably the smartest people you've ever met. Every single one.
I'm not going to go that far, but they're not dumb. They're not dumb. They're all a little off in some ways.
Yeah, those are 3 broken people.
But intellectually, they seem fine. They seem like they got the capacity to support themselves in life.
No, so it was a great school. That was a fun experience going there.
It was an option for you to go to like Bangor High or whatever, but your parents wanted you to go to the private one.
Yeah, my parents. It was definitely easier for my family because my sister was there.
Okay.
And
did they provide you transportation?
That school?
Yeah.
Yes. So the transportation was a little interesting. You had to get on a bus that brought us to Brewer High School, which was the closest public high school. And then there was a bus that John Baptist provided that like shuttled people from Brewer to Baptist.
Okay.
So it was like the Brewer public school system sort of picked up everyone from our area and brought them there, and then we could get a connector over to Baptist.
Is that how you got to school?
No, so my sister was a year and a half older than me.
Oh, she had a car?
Started school. She had a driver's license.
Nice.
So I rode into school with her. Or perhaps for a little bit freshman year, my parents, who were both working in Bangor, could drive us in and then go to work after. So we'd get dropped off early at John Baptist. It was a nerdy place for the college prep kids. It was cool to come to school early and do your homework.
Are you being for real?
Yeah, we would all hang out.
That was cool.
In the auditorium, and everyone would pull out their homework, and you would collaborate with whoever was the best at the subject, and they would tutor you.
Really?
Yeah, other kids call it cheating or copying, but
no, that's a cool system. I mean, that definitely didn't happen in my school, but that's cool. That sounds like a place of fucking
place of knowledge.
A place of knowledge, a place of learning, like a quality academic institution. I'm being serious. That's cool.
No, I don't really know how they did it exactly, but they did sort of cultivate this thing. Like, it was very much a community.
Right.
Like, people would show up in the morning. You'd get there. Let's say school started at 7:30. People would be there as early as like 6:30.
Damn.
And like hanging out, chatting with their friends, and doing homework, doing whatever. I don't know. Maybe the band kids did music.
Right.
Shit,
there's no one smoking weed under the bleachers and shit, or like fucking in the bathrooms. It's not that kind of place.
Yeah, there's some fucking in the bathrooms probably. The weed mostly happened outside of the school.
Okay, so y'all were still normal high school kids.
And probably, yeah, sometimes in the morning, but more often probably after school.
Okay. So it wasn't just like a bunch of fucking academic robots.
It wasn't just we were nerdier
than Bangor High.
Public schools, Bangor or Brewer. So Brewer is one town, like between Holden, Brewer, Bangor. And that's actually where most of my friends from middle school went to Brewer.
I got you.
Because they were cool.
Right. Did y'all get your ass kicked in sports by those guys?
No, we whooped their asses.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Did y'all have a football team?
Yeah, we had a football team. They got their asses whooped when I went there.
But like soccer and stuff, did y'all?
Soccer, we were pretty nasty.
Y'all would beat them?
We would beat Brewer.
Nice.
And we beat Bangor, and Bangor was like more than twice our size.
Wow, so they were like the worst of both worlds. Those guys are just kind of like the dredges of society.
They were really good at some stuff. They just weren't as good at soccer.
Well, they weren't as good at school, and they weren't as good at sports.
Man, we were like.
Did the people in Bangor at these public high schools, did more of those people end up like staying in Maine, or like not going off to school, or?
Yeah, so that's college admittance.
Mm-hmm.
People who intended to go to college and were accepted and probably went to college from John Baptist was like 99%.
Damn.
So it was almost every student who graduated went on to college.
Wow.
The 1 or 2% either like enlisted in the military, took like a gap year, or like, maybe they did something else.
Everybody had a plan.
But everybody had a plan. Everybody met multiple times with their guidance counselor.
Wow.
To like review your college apps. Like, did you write your essays? Who are your references? Blah blah blah.
Damn.
We took junior or senior year, one of our English classes, like one of the assignments was like around like writing your application essays for college. So the school did a really good job encouraging and preparing students for that. They offered, all the AP classes you could pretty much imagine, and if they didn't offer it, you could either go and take the class at Bangor, Brewer, or you could go for like math classes and stuff. You could go to the University of Maine and do that shit. So there was like a lot of that stuff.
You ended up at George Washington, which is ultimately how our paths are going to end up crossing here in a minute. How did that happen? Why George Washington?
Why George Washington? So I, as you've pointed out, I lived in the woods.
You did?
I wasn't the most worldly traveler or cultured young man, but I was interested in politics. I was interested in international affairs. I wanted to go to a city, and
You went from like the middle of nowhere to kind of like the center of the world, really.
yeah. Actually, I've always sort of thought the world revolved around me. So
No, but I think this
no,
kind
I
of
did.
That decision it's reflective of kind of who you are as a human being. And you and I, of all the people I've interviewed thus far on this podcast, I'm thinking here, that's why you're hearing a pause, just to make sure I don't say anything like offend anyone. But yeah, you're the most similar to me in like our decision making process and our outlook on life, and like I think who we want to be and how we want to go about living our life and our decisions that we make. Like you're an adventurous spirit and you make like kind of crazy decisions, just like I do. So like no, but from growing up in the woods in a very small town, rural area, and then going to George Washington University because you want to study politics and be like the middle of the action and decision-making processes globally, that's like a big jump. But I think it's representative. I think it's admirable of like having the courage and taking the initiative to do that. But it sounds like that's what you wanted to do. Like you want to be like, I need to be in this shit. What did you want to be when you grew up? Like so think back like early childhood, and then so what did you want to be when you were like a little kid, and then
I get that one. And
then more rationally as you got older into adolescence. What did you want to be like going to college? So for like me, for instance, and I've said this in other podcasts, like there was no doubt in my mind all throughout my early childhood I was going to be a professional athlete. And I've told this story a couple of times too. My 9th grade honors English class, we had to write, I forget exactly what the theme of the essay was. We had to write some essay on like, I don't know, coming to terms with growing up or what we wanted to be or something. And I like spilled my heart out in this essay where it was the first time I acknowledged when I was 14 years old, like fuck.
I might not.
I'm not gonna be a professional athlete. Like you see, I'm at this giant high school. I see like athletes from all over the state. And I'm like, fuck, I just don't have that God-given athletic ability. And I was in the throes of struggling with OCD, and I kind of felt like, man, it's gonna take me a while to dig myself out of this. And so then I really kind of started to think. And once I got to college, I was like, okay. I started to think, okay, maybe I'll be like a sports writer. And then that kind of developed into like I'm interested in the international things and politics. So like talk to me about your dream development from childhood up into college.
Jeez, I'm trying to think what I wanted to do when I was in high school, but before that, I mean I know without a doubt my first career ambition was to be a cowboy. Positive. And I took horseback riding classes. I got the boots. I didn't take those things off for like months. And I was pretty sure that's like what I was like, I want to ride horses. I want to like wrestle cattle. And I thought I could do that. And then I sort of found out
you can't still do that, maybe.
Well, I think it's kind of like obsolete. Like I feel like maybe
that's not a job anymore.
Have like a cow prod, like a taser.
My grandma Toadie always wanted to be a cowgirl. Actually, I think she might have also wanted to be a cowboy.
Toadie and I should talk. Toadie and I get along well, and that might be one of the big reasons why. Speak the same language, Pilgrim.
So then at what point did you kind of come to terms, do you remember coming to terms like, okay, maybe cowboy isn't like a viable career option?
I'm thinking I must have been in middle school when I realized like, no, that's not really.
When you probably applied to GW, you saw that wasn't on like
I saw like it list. I was like, so none of these AP credits go towards cow wrestling? So probably in middle school I realized that wasn't really much of a thing. I think for a while I probably wanted to be like an author or a writer.
Okay.
I certainly wanted to be an adventurer.
What does that mean?
An explorer. Like I wanted to go to unknown lands. That might have even started as young as the cowboy thing. So maybe I could do both.
Okay.
Take the cows to unknown lands.
Yeah.
But so I was always obsessed with like exploring, like being out, discovering new stuff, seeing new stuff, just generally going on adventures.
You still are.
I still am. And that's when I never quite really like wrestled to the ground. Like, how do you do that today?
Right.
Like, is that an astronaut? Is that like an archaeologist?
Right.
Is that a geologist?
How do you monetize this passion?
How do you make that a career? And I was talking with one guy who was like an anthropologist who would go and they would assess. It was almost like a land surveyor meets anthropology. So if anyone found any sort of like artifact or remain anywhere they were going to do an industrial development, this guy would have to go and explore that whole area and like map it out and just like find out what was going on everywhere. And that sounded kind of cool. I was like, oh, you're like an adventurer in the 21st century,
right,
where we already have a map of everything,
right?
But you get like the micro, you like really get into it.
But we don't have a map of everything. This is gonna be a bad seg or aside. But we were talking about this last night around the campfire with your parents. This fucking lost city in Honduras, dude.
Yeah, the LIDAR machines. And
they're
stuff.
like just still discovering these lost fucking cities. It's crazy.
Alex, you have no idea. I read that book. So there's this book out. It's called The Lost City of the Monkey God. Check it out on Amazon. I don't have any investments. I don't have anything invested in this, but it's a cool book. And it's like it's totally, and which is what's got me thinking about like anthropology and archaeology, and even there was like microbiology. There was all these sciences were involved in this trip to this like rainforest in La Mosquitia in Honduras, where Alex and I used to. Well, we didn't live in the jungle, but we lived in the country, and I've always wanted to go out there and like go and do a trip. Like you can go rafting through it, you can go hiking through it.
Yeah, we need to do that, dude. We still need to do that.
Definitely need to do that. But these people found this, like lost city that no one had been to in 500 years, and I was like, that. Like I read that book and I was like, that is what. Like, how do I get involved in that? Like,
so, and you read this book came out like a couple years ago, right?
This book came out probably 2017. Yeah.
So you still think as a grown man now, we're both 30-year-old grown men, right? We're supposed to, society.
I am a 30-year-old. I don't know what this thing about grown man is. Like,
I'm spun around on this planet for 30 years. Have you done 30 rotations around the sun?
I've done at least 30 rotations.
Okay, but according to societal standards, like you need to stop thinking about like going and hopping in the jungle, dude. And
yeah, but that's just bullshit. People change their careers all the time.
Okay, good.
I don't think a career exists today. There's all kinds of like writing about that now too, because people do all these different. We were talking with Haley, one of my best friends, today, and she's telling about her boyfriend who, like, when he turned 30, decided, oh, I don't really want to be an architect. I think I'd like to be an airplane pilot.
Right.
And then he flies commercial planes for Frontier.
Yeah.
So there's nothing that says you can't change your career.
Totally.
I think we're going to totally blow that whole concept of careers up, and it's about, like, what are you capable of doing and what do you want to do? And I don't know. I just tend to think that I should live an unconventional life.
Preach, Samuel. Fucking preach, dude. This is what I want I want these kind of messages to be spread in the podcast, and certainly I've interviewed a lot of my friends who are living more traditional lifestyles, and that's totally cool as well. There's no judgment here at all. But I also want people who are listening to this to realize, like, dude, there is no longer a prescription or a recipe book or a blueprint for how you're supposed to go about your life professionally, personally, or whatever. Follow what you feel is like going to make you fulfilled and actualized as a human being, even if there's a lot of fear attached to that, man. Yeah. And so Sam here, if he wants to be a cowboy, no, but if he wants to like investigate this fucking lost city, no one else is investigating it apparently. Apparently, you were telling me last night the Honduran government is kind of just posting up military around there. I can almost guarantee you there's very little action. It out.
Well, that's the other thing.
The Honduran government, I'm sure, is going to fucking figure that out.
Could really be an adventure. I could be the guy who's like looting the cities.
Totally.
A little black market.
You can be that guy.
At one point, when I left Honduras,
I remember that day. It was a fucking sad day.
So I left Honduras. I came back to the U.S. I thought I was gonna, I thought I was so smart, and like, there's a big ego thing that happens when you live in a place like Honduras and you're the white dude.
Yeah.
Or the white dudes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where you're like,
you think you're hot shit.
Everyone knows who we are. Everyone, like, I can go in anywhere and people, will
treat you with respect.
Will treat me well.
And assume that you're like some sort of like a first-class citizen.
Assume I know something about something.
Right.
And then I got back and I couldn't get a job in the U.S. I couldn't get a job like washing dishes. And so I'm like applying. I want to go abroad again. I want to do something in international development. And I'm looking at this organization in Nicaragua. And I get like an interview. I do a Skype interview. They're similar to the Organization for Youth Empowerment, where Al and I worked. A little NGO. Did they know about it yet?
No, we're gonna get into that. Well, I've probably spoken a little bit, but we'll get into it more specifically.
Youth Development NGO, Honduras, arts, crafts, radio, good public message. There were arts and crafts.
Like how you led with arts and crafts.
Leadership development, capacity building classes.
Sam finger painted for 3 years.
I didn't get into many of the arts or crafts. I played a little soccer though. And
arts
and I'm interviewing with these people. They seem pretty cool. They're like Oye, but not as well developed and like not really, don't quite have their shit together yet. But they're on this lagoon in Nicaragua, and it sounds just totally beautiful. Like
right.
They've got the place hooked up. But then I start researching the people involved, right? And they were doing the two guys involved were one was a biologist and the other one was like an archaeologist, and they had been involved in the expansion of, I guess it's not the Panama Canal, but putting a canal through the lakes in Nicaragua
right, yeah.
to connect the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans and create a alternate route to the Panama Canal.
Right.
And so they did this massive like investigation of where they could, what the biological impact
right.
would be, environmental impact, and also are there archaeological sites, whatever, that need to be preserved or will be destroyed or whatever. And they had found all these artifacts, and these guys had stolen them and like sold them on the black market, and were involved in this like huge scandal, and were, you know, in all the local papers, all these like, and I was just like, wow, like, can I go and work for those guys? Is that is that moral? Are these guys moral characters? Upright.
They're entrepreneurs, man.
Citizens? I don't know. But what happens with those artifacts anyways? You know, who knows? So I decided I would pull out my application and not go to Nicaragua.
Wait, the NGO was involved in pilfering the artifacts?
Yeah, the founders of the NGO were the guys who would pilfer these artifacts.
Oh, and then they had started an NGO.
And they started an NGO.
A separate NGO that was like
with
youth
some
development.
of the money.
Probably.
Who knows? Maybe they were giving it back to the community in a way that the community may never have seen otherwise. But
reinvest in the community.
I decided I would not go work with them.
All right, so let's get into that. It's kind of a good segue down to Honduras. All right, so when you went to, we'll go from GW then Honduras. So when you went to GW, what did you declare as your major?
So let's see, what did I declare? I think I started out as a U.S. government and politics major, and
so like political science, basically.
Yeah, political science. And I took a couple classes on political science, and they didn't really teach you anything about political science. It was all like, even our like introductory or basic classes, like I thought I would be learning a lot more, maybe political philosophy. I thought I would understand more about why we believe that democracy is right, or why, you know, what's the philosophy behind how we've created governing systems, why we've done it this way versus that way, why we consider this the most, you know, egalitarian or equal or free society. And we read a couple interesting articles on that, but every conversation basically devolved down into current day politics, like Democrats versus Republicans, what's happening in Washington, D.C. And D.C. is very much what I've found persistently to be the case, is D.C. is not a particularly academic city, but is a very like zeitgeist city. Whatever's happening in the news is like runs D.C., runs the conversation, runs, I think, to a large degree, the academic institutions. Yeah. And I just felt like all my classes were just like blowing in the wind, like American flags blowing in the wind.
Right.
We were just like going with whatever was on the news that day was sort of what we were all talking about. And I wasn't learning anything about actual government and politics. I was just learning about the U.S. political system as it is today.
News. Yeah.
And I was like, I guess I could learn this just watching CNN.
Yeah.
So I switched it up, and I changed my major from political science to international affairs, and I focused on Latin America. And why did I focus on Latin America? I'm not entirely sure. I guess I'd had one class on Latin America.
Did you speak Spanish or anything going in?
I had 2 years of Spanish in high school, and I did not speak it at all. But that's, I kind of just charted a course that way and started taking some classes, and I loved it. And I would say those classes were a lot more philosophical.
Totally.
In the sense that we started looking at revolutions, we started looking at different governing systems. We started looking at, asking why and wondering why, what U.S. foreign policy, geopolitics, and it was maybe what U.S. or political science didn't have was a focal point that we could approach from different lenses.
Right.
And that's what Latin American specific international affairs, lent me, was a focal point where we could look at populism, we could look at fascism, we could look at democracy, we could look at pluralistic societies, we could look at, all of these different things that affect how we govern, how we live, how we form communities, how we create a world vision, whatever we want to call it, in a different way than I was able to do just focus on U.S. government and politics.
Right. Yeah, dude, I was kind of the same way. I don't remember, because I was an international affairs major as well, and I was particularly interested in Latin America. I don't know how I developed that particular interest in Latin America necessarily, and I really don't know what was the exact impetus for me to study international affairs. I think the difference between me and you, though, I had no political understanding or awareness whatsoever when I went to college. Like, all I knew was sports, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of that was the OCD, right? Sports was like an escape from the OCD, which was kind of tormenting my mind all through my adolescence, and I could focus on sports, both playing and like following as a fan, as like an escape. I didn't have like much brain power left to like investigate other things. Once I got to college and the OCD kind of started to fade away through various therapeutic means, I my brain had more energy to expand and kind of be interested in other shit. But that was the same thing. My first international affairs class, it was like we were all of a sudden I was becoming aware of the fact, like, holy shit, there's like a whole giant world out there.
Yeah.
Like, this is fascinating. I want to learn more about this shit. And I'd taken Spanish too in high school. What is that, party boat?
Yeah, there's like a little party boat.
What's it called?
Cruising by. They've got a strobe light, and they're blasting some tunes. I don't know if you can hear that.
Columbus Cruises? That looks fun. Anyway, yeah, the same thing. So the reason I bring that up is because that like mutual interest, both in international affairs, Latin America, and then I started minoring in Spanish as well. Like I said, I don't really know where the impetus for Latin America came from exactly, but that's kind of where our paths started to converge.
Yeah.
So let's get into that story.
Well, I would say I should give some like a little bit of credit.
Please.
When I was in high school, we had a couple exchange students from Chile. And one of my best buddies from high school, who Alex knows, meets later in life.
Anders?
A character, Anders Beal.
I need to get Anders on the podcast.
Was obsessed with this Chilean girl,
Ooh.
Maria Bustos.
She hot?
Maria was beautiful. Beautiful, right. Maria Bustos de Santiago.
She sounds hot.
So we had, in high school, I had a few connections to Latin America, and Anders was probably a big influence there. Just, your best buddy is like always talking about, I remember Anders had a piggy bank. And every day he would be dropping change into this piggy bank, and it just said like Chile fund on it because he wanted to go down to Chile. And he probably saved up like, because he'd cash it out. He'd have to cash it out. He'd have to cash it out every couple of weeks to get, like
cigarettes,
beer and cigarettes. But Anders was definitely,
was that the impetus
got Latin America on my radar?
Was Maria Bustos his impetus for Latin American interest?
Maria Bustos
Did he ever express any interest in Latin America prior to Maria?
Maria Bustos was like, if Anders had like a little bump of like heroin or something, Maria Bustos was like direct injection to his veins.
He was mainlining Maria Bustos.
Yeah, he mainlined Maria Bustos for a few years there.
She was at y'all's school for a while then?
She was never at our school. She was at Bangor Christian, which was the little Christian school down the road from us.
Damn, that makes it kind of even hotter.
Oh yeah, the little Catholic girl from Santiago, Chile came up to Maine for a couple years.
Did they ever date? Did he like?
Oh yeah, they dated.
For real?
They dated. Yeah, they were were a thing, man. They were a thing. And Anders went down to Chile to visit Maria.
Oh, shit, so it happened.
Right after we graduated, the summer after we graduated high school, I think. I think that's when. You'll have to ask Anders.
I'll ask Anders.
And, I mean, this dude, like, learned Spanish because of Maria.
Right.
And Anders' Spanish is, like, the most Chilean Spanish. Like, I can't even understand the dude when he speaks Spanish. But he was like citing like Neruda to Maria in Spanish. That's like how he learned Spanish in junior year of high school.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
He's a sharp dude.
He's a little romantic.
He's got a Latin thing though. Sans the fact that he's now dating a girl from where's she from? Somalia. Prior to that, I've only known Anders for a year, but it seemed like he was always into Latina chicks.
Oh yeah, he was.
I'm the same way, dude. I love Latina chicks.
He likes Latina chicks. Well, he likes chicks. I mean, we like.
He's into chicks. Yeah, that's true. It doesn't really matter color or nationality for me. I guess if I had to rank them, I think I'd put Latino at the top. But
okay.
Really, I'm not in a position to pick here. Be picky. So you meet my sister then. My younger sister went to GW. This is how Sam and I meet. I went to University of Georgia. Sam's from fucking Maine. Yeah. My sister went to George Washington University as well, and y'all met on like a community service trip of some kind or something?
That was a kind of cool thing. So, let's see, was junior year, summer between sophomore and junior year.
Maybe like 2009, 2009.
2009, Alex's little sister and my girlfriend at the time had been putting together, they were very involved in these things at GW they call alternative breaks. And so it's like during a summer, during the winter break, during the spring break, instead of going and partying somewhere or just going home and sitting, college students like go on these trips, international or national trips, and they do volunteer work and they learn about wherever they're going. And Alex's sister Morgan and my girlfriend at the time, Supriya, were planning this trip together, and they were going to take students down to Honduras, and this was going to be in the winter trip of my junior year of school, I guess.
08 going into 9?
Yeah, or 09 going into 10.
Okay.
And I'm talking to my girlfriend that summer. And she's like, well, are you going to come down and visit me? I'm living in Maine at the time. She's in Pennsylvania. And I said, hey, I visited you in Pennsylvania. That was kind of boring. So why don't we do something different? Like, let's go somewhere. Like, let's go abroad somewhere. And we settled eventually on Honduras. And we were going to go and basically do a recon trip and check out Oye, where they were going to take the volunteers and, like, check out Honduras a little bit. And we were like, let's just go, like, we can do, like, some volunteer work. They're going to give us this, like, killer deal and, like, be our tour guide and stuff. Like, this will be awesome. And then we were like, well, let's open it up. Let's see if Morgan wants to go, the other trip leader. And then what we decided was basically I was going to bring one of my buddies from high school, one of my buddies from home. Morgan was going to bring her best friend, Julianne. And Supriya brought one of her friends from home, so it ended up being 6 of us, and we all went, and like none of us, like I didn't know Morgan, I definitely didn't know Morgan's friend, I didn't know Julianne, I just knew my buddy Pat,
right, and
no one else really knew each other except for Supriya and Morgan and Supriya and I, and we went down and just had an amazing trip. Kat, who was like the volunteer coordinator down there, she's like an American who is living in El Progreso, Honduras, before any of us got down there, was like our tour guide. We went all over the place. We went to Tela. We went out partying in San Pedro. We went out in El Progreso. It was just like a total blast. And that's when Morgan and I started to become friends. But I would only say started. Like we hung out for 1 week and then basically went back to school and like didn't really see each other again. They ended up having to cancel the trip Morgan and Supriya were going to lead because even when we had just gone down on that trip, that was immediately after the Golpe de Estado, the coup in Honduras, 2009. So there were like military checkpoints and stuff all over the place.
So Honduras, just a quick background, Honduras had a pretty, rough history. Sam know more about than I do. But yeah, in 2009, right after or I guess right before y'all went down there, they had a coup. They had a military coup.
Yep.
And since then, man, and I mean, Honduras has essentially been like a failed state where there's really no governmental infrastructure and gangs kind of run the place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tons of issues, violence.
Yeah. It has
corruption, whatever.
Yeah, it's had the highest murder rate on the planet, or, you know, government figures now say that it's gone down, but that's pretty dubious distinction.
But also,
it's a very dangerous place.
And I always have to say this. There's something that is, I don't know if it's a product of that or if it was always existed in Honduras, but the like community and the people you meet down there care so much more about each other and you, and are like, it's like one of the most welcoming places I've ever been.
Totally.
And there's just something that was like incredible about the people I met in Honduras.
Right. But it's a weird fucking distinction because at the same time, it's like incredibly easy to make friends, and all of a sudden you feel very loved and welcomed immediately, and you become fast friends with people, even if there's like a language barrier. Yet at the same time,
you're like
any stranger, you don't know which stranger walking down the street will put a bullet in your head for your iPhone.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a weird fucking dichotomy.
Yeah.
Where you got the most loving people in the world, and then at the same hand, individuals who have like no value for human life whatsoever.
And I almost, and I'm not positive, but I almost feel like one has trouble existing without the other.
Okay. How so? Get into that.
I think that there's a reason people have to have such a supportive, like close-knit type of community. And I think it has something to do with like the duress or stress of the situation, the vulnerability of people, the reliance on community and each other. That if these people didn't have these incredibly strong social networks and family networks where they supported and gave each other often what they had, whatever support that was,
you're just living in a state of chaos.
I don't think that, you know, people could like survive and make it work.
Right.
And I'm sort of fascinated by it because, you know, does it exist? If you went to another place that had similar issues with like violence, crime, corruption, something like that, is the culture this, you know, similar?
Right.
Or is it different? And I don't know that.
Right. We haven't only had experience in one failed country. Morgan would be good to ask that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's true, man. It's almost like living in such a dire circumstances cultivates and promotes a very tight-knit sense of community.
Yeah. Well, and it's almost like you need an extreme to have the other extreme.
Right.
Like you can't have a middle ground and an extreme. Like look at American politics today.
Right.
We've got like
two polar opposites.
Right. Like, do we have extremes, or if you ask other people, maybe we've got a middle ground and just an extreme.
Right.
But it really seems like this is like the most polarized.
Right.
You know, maybe we can get more polarized, but do you need a polarized? Does one thing going so far in one direction cause, you know, an equal reaction on the other side? I don't know.
Dude, that is fascinating because I have thought about that. I guess I've never verbalized it like this, but it definitely has crossed my mind because when I think back my time in Honduras, and maybe I thought about it when we were down there, but it's like every person, pretty much everyone you interact with
is either a friend or not.
Right. But even so, dude, it's not like you ever interact with people who are like, you know, talk to you about like how little they value human life or how they want to murder people for their iPhone or whatever. Everyone you talk with is very loving and friendly, but yet you see it, and you're not only are you aware of it, you see it on a daily basis, like extreme levels of violence.
Yep.
And like complete lack of value for human life. I don't know. It's weird. It just like occurs. Like that like violence like burst out of society, but like you never come into like constant interaction with it like in your day-to-day conversations. It's not like when you interact with people on the street, like they like creep you out or like scare you, whatever. It's just like, you know, you're used to spending time with all these friendly, warm, loving people, and then all of a sudden you've got a gun in your face when you're walking down the sidewalk. It's crazy.
Yeah. And I mean, there's like, I mean, you know, when it was right after organizing Copa Oye, which is a story in itself. And that when you showed up to Honduras?
Yeah, that was my first day in Honduras. So real quick. Oh yeah, go ahead. That was my first day in Honduras. So
I don't know where. Yeah, you should tell this one, and then where are we in our conversation? Should we do a process check?
No. Yeah. Oh yeah, let's just
roll. Let's just let it roll, man.
Just a brief overview of it. So yeah, you and Morgan, that trip falls apart eventually, but you and Morgan end up going down there together in summer of 2009. Because didn't y'all end up taking a semester off?
Yeah. So Morgan and Supriya can't do the trip. I go back by myself. I'd already booked tickets. I was like, y'all can't do the trip. They went to. Did they go international? I don't know what they did. They did a trip somewhere else. They probably went to New Orleans again. And I just went by myself back to Honduras, which
summer 2010.
George Washington University had deemed way too dangerous for students to go to.
So you just went on your own dime?
Over winter break when their trip was going to go. I just went on my own dime. I was just doing my own thing, and went down and I had a total blast. I stayed with, the locals. I helped Luis, who was the director of Oye, put a cement parking lot in behind his house. Like I was just like one of the guys.
Right.
I was one of the boys.
Ingratiate yourself.
And then when it came time for Kat to come back to the U.S., the folks at Oye called me up and said, "Hey Sam, we want you to be our volunteer coordinator. We want you to come down and do it." And I said, "Yeah, that's cool, but I'm in college."
Right, yeah, I'm still in school. You have a year left of school.
And they said, "Well, can you just do it, for a while?" And I said, "Well, why not?" And I looked at my credits and shit, and I was like, "I guess I can graduate if I take a semester off."
Right.
So I decided I would go down for the summer after junior year and the first half of senior year, and then I'd come back halfway through senior year and just finish it up.
Right.
And that's what I did. I went down. I was going to be down for 8.5 months, 9 months, something like that. And Morgan was going to come down and do a summer volunteering with Oye, and she was going to be down there for 3 months. And Morgan and I became roommates, and it was a blast. I mean,
Morgan's
it was amazing.
My sister.
And I'll be honest, I don't know if I've told Morgan this, but at first I was pissed. I was like, I don't want Morgan here.
This is my show.
I just wanted to come down to Honduras and do this by myself.
Right.
I like these people. I
understand that.
I want to be the only person from the U.S. here.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know what you're doing.
I get
Morgan,
that.
you can go home.
Right.
And 3 months into it, and Morgan and I were really good friends at this point, and she's like, "Hey, I think I'm gonna stay. What do you think I should do?"
Yeah.
And at this point, I was like, she could stay. Morgan, she's cool, or she could go. And then I'd have my chance to just be Sam in Honduras.
Right.
I was like, and that'd be cool too.
Uh-huh.
And I think at the end of the day, I came down on the side of Morgan, hey, you need to make this decision.
Right.
Either way, I'll support it.
Right.
But you got a pretty cool thing going here.
Right.
And I understand if you want to stay.
Right.
And she stayed, and that was awesome. I mean, I just had a blast.
So y'all stayed all...
In hindsight, I wouldn't do it any other way.
Totally, dude. That's an invaluable experience to have.
Yeah.
I remember I had just graduated college, and I had, gone out to Phoenix to do my teacher boot camp. I can remember being at teacher boot camp and my mom calling me up and Morgan calling me up and being like, she's going to take a semester off of college and stay in Honduras and essentially volunteer. And even me, I'm a pretty crazy dude. Even I was like, are we sure about this? But yeah, dude, I couldn't be more happy she did. I think it was incredibly positive for her development as a human being, and then ultimately that leads to me coming down there.
Yeah.
So y'all stay all of that summer. You stayed that first semester of your senior year, so this is now fall 2010, and then you guys go back to school for second semester. So this is winter spring 2011. But then you guys were part of the community at that point, and you'd gotten hooked. You'd gotten bit by the bug. And so then you guys start putting together your own little nonprofit.
Right.
And go ahead.
Well, I would just say, Morgan and I, the big thing that we sort of, I'm trying to think exactly how to say this. So one thing that my main responsibility while I was there was to organize and lead volunteer trips. And then I had all these other ancillary things like translating, doing website and donor relations and all this other stuff that like existed that I had to do. But supposedly our big moneymaker at Oye at that point to bring in funds for the programs was to host university volunteer trips.
Right.
That was one of the big things we did, and we used to bring these trips down, and they would like paint a mural, and we'd drive around town and like see some stuff. And they always wanted to do something like build a school or like paint a school or like fix a school or like do,
feel like they had accomplished something.
Like feel like they had gone and like sweat and like helped these poor Hondurans like in a way that the Hondurans just couldn't figure out to do for themselves.
Right.
And it was a little bit of just like, total like mental masturbation on the part of like U.S.
Moral
college
masturbation.
student volunteers. And let's be honest, when I was down there like volunteering, basically I was down there just like learning. I was like going around like asking questions, soaking stuff up. I don't know if I picked up a hammer or like I did actually. The first time we went down, we built a radio recording booth, which was cool. But the kids at Oye probably did as much of that as any of us.
Right. Keep going. I want to peek on it.
And so what we realized this like volunteer trips was really all about was it was about going and learning about another culture. It was about learning about what maybe international development was, what nonprofits were doing, what the difference between an international nonprofit and a domestic nonprofit was, how projects worked. So we just started developing this interest in all these other pieces that you were sort of getting through these volunteer trips, but we wanted to make that more the focus and start moving away from, hey, you're going to go down and physically do volunteer work that will help Hondurans. Because at the end of the day, if a Honduran school needed paint, there were plenty of people willing and able to paint a school way faster and better than a few American college students could. So we sort of wanted to start changing that dynamic and have like a little bit more honest, maybe a little bit more intellectually curious approach to what an international university student trip could consist of. So we tried to put together this program we called Paso Honduras. Paso Honduras, which means step Honduras or step to Honduras.
I didn't even put that together ever. The acronym that means step.
Yeah, and it was this nice, like, Hondurans love acronyms. So I'm sure the PASO stood for something like, but I don't remember. Yeah. And so we basically made this little NGO. We got like 4 or 5 students to go down to Honduras to do it. We worked with some sociologists, some artists, a bunch of youth, and international aid workers, Caritas, maybe Posmo actually. And
yeah, Posmo. We visited Posmo.
Which was part of PSI and administering a USAID project. And we sort of put together this curriculum around, what is international development and what does it specifically look like in the case of Honduras. And we looked at Honduran culture and all this stuff. And I thought it was a pretty interesting, pretty cool program. It was a big undertaking and definitely did not go smoothly at all times.
Nah, dude.
But yeah, we had some balls dropped.
Yeah, so that's how I came. So I just finished my first year teaching. I knew my sister had obviously taken some time off, and I knew about you at the time. I never met you, to work in Honduras. And then she calls me up kind of towards the end of second semester of my first year teaching in Arizona. And she's like, yeah, me and Sam are, starting this nonprofit, which is basically like, we're going to bring college students down to like study the role that nonprofit organizations play in Honduran society, essentially, is what it sounded like to me. And they're like, do you want to come with us?
That's a much more concise and better explanation
than
the one I was giving.
I was going to pee. You had some time to kill.
Yeah.
So like basically, do you want to come down and help us? And I was kind of like, I was like the janitor of the project, like the fix. I was the guy come down and moving.
No, you were the logistics guy. We had so many balls dropped, and we get a little bit. Maybe Al could get into that actually with our Honduran partners. That one of our Honduran partners, that had Al not been there, we would have been so shit out of luck. I mean, we just needed someone who could like move and groove and make stuff happen, and Al made that
Problem
happen
solver, I guess.
with zero experience in the country prior, and just like jumping in, like, what are you guys doing? Okay, yeah, we need to get like 17 like bottles of like water here, and you need this guy to show up at 8 p.m. You got it. Yeah. And we'd be like, okay, we don't know where he's going, but
yeah,
like he'll probably deliver.
Yeah,
Now we gotta fry these other fish.
Yeah. So Morgan is the way it seemed to me going down there, and this is kind of always my experience in the nonprofit world, especially in Latin America. It's like, seems like things are in place and things are going to run smoothly, and of course shit just hits the fan immediately. So it seemed to me like I kind of thought I'm just going to be like one of the students. I'm basically going on this trip for free as one of the students, and I can just kind of tag along with everybody else and maybe do some logistical things if they need help. But as soon as you get down there, like everything that's been planned, all of our like speakers, organizations that have been scheduled aren't actually scheduled. There's more logistical stuff like transportation is falling apart. The car that we think we have doesn't exist. The food that we think we have procured to sustain the lives of our volunteer or our students, our participants, doesn't exist. And so basically Sam and Morgan are, the bosses. They're coordinating the whole thing. And so they would just give me like, an order, and I would kind of have to run around and like solve all these problems that are falling apart. We all did it collectively, but that ended up being my role. It's just like be a problem solver behind the scenes, kind of running around trying to, plug holes in the dam. But it was an amazing experience, dude. Like looking back on it, it's incredibly hectic, right? Like you said, I'd never been down there. It's very violent. All of a sudden, like you have to constantly be looking over your shoulder when you're in public. It's incredibly fucking hot all the time. There's all these problems going on, but like you grow so much even from just like, I don't know, what was that, like a 6-8 week experience that I was down there?
I was there for 6 weeks. You were probably 8.
8, yeah.
You were longer.
8, yeah, I was there a little longer. So yeah, that was our first foray in Honduras. We all go back. You figure out, like, you thought you had graduated college at that point. I remember you got news when you were down there, like, your advisor got in touch with you from GW. It's like, actually, you're not a college graduate. You're missing, like, one course.
Yeah.
And you go back, and then I think you and Jordan were, like, starting a food truck in D.C. at that point, right?
Yeah.
But then you also figured out, like, okay, I'm starting a food truck, but I'm not a college graduate, so I got to take, like, this one course on the side while I'm trying to get this food truck fired up. And so we end up all going back to DC, or I go back to teach in Arizona. You go back, work on the food truck, and get your college degree.
Get my GED.
Morgan goes back and is finishing up her last year of school, which she's the shooting star of all of us, right? She's not only finishing up last year of school, she's also finishing up a master's program.
Yeah, she's doing like a 5-year master's in 4 years when she took a year, like a half a semester, or half a year off.
Yeah. You go back to DC. The food truck doesn't really work out, right?
Oh man, that was a trip.
Yeah, but then you end up back down in Honduras full time.
Right.
So you took what was it? You took the job that you had before, but now for like an indefinite period.
Yeah. So let's see, how did that go? We found a replacement for me, Michael Solis,
right?
Who's just like a baller. Princeton grad with a master's, went down, replaced me. So obviously I was invaluable.
Right.
He replaced me with a Princeton grad. I didn't even have a college degree. But Michael kicked ass down there and was there for maybe a year and a half or 2.5 years or something. Because I came back, I was working on the food truck for a while, finished up school, and then went back. They were looking for someone else. My food truck didn't go so hot.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, you know what, I've got another round of Honduras in me. I'm not done with that yet. And I went back down and was there for a little over 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Morgan ends up graduating. She gets a job in Honduras as well. She ended up working in San Pedro Sula, which actually was the most violent city in the world at that time. We live in Progreso, which certainly was no Shangri-La, but it was actually better off violence-wise compared to San Pedro Sula.
You were back teaching in Phoenix?
So I was back teaching now my 3rd year. So I finished up my 2nd year. You go down, take the Oye job full-time with no indefinitely. Morgan gets the job with, I guess it's Population Services International, PSI. She's doing like sex ed, pregnancy prevention type stuff in San Pedro Sula, kind of running that office. She's about 20, 30 minutes away from you. And then I applied to Peace Corps at the time.
Oh, that's right.
And actually, I applied to Peace Corps the summer before my 3rd year teaching. Got accepted, and they were going to send me to Peru. And I remember I was at my beginning of the year training, about to start my 3rd year, and you and I had been talking back and forth, and this job had come open with another organization that was working in partnership with the Organization for Youth Empowerment, OYE, the organization you had been working with, the Global Playground organization. This job had opened up, and you were like, dude, you should take this job, because you now know the lay of the land. I had met, all the actors that were kind of involved in that, and they'd kind of offered the job to me. And so I very much contemplated not going back and teaching my 3rd year a week before school was starting. But I felt really bad about it at that point, man. I had taught 4th grade 2 years in a row, and then I was moving up with my 4th grade class to 5th grade, so I knew these kids, I knew their parents, I knew their families. I felt real bad about just dipping out a year before school started. And I'd also told Peace Corps I was going to do Peace Corps after my 3rd year. So I was like, I'll go back 3rd year. This will give me a year to figure out what the fuck I'm going to do. My 3rd year of teaching is winding up, but then I now need to make a decision fuck, Peace Corps thinks I'm going with them, but, Sam, who now feels like a brother, and my actual sister are still down in Honduras, and they're going to be there at least for another year. Yep. I kind of want to go down and be with them. So I end up telling Peace Corps, thanks but no thanks, and I take this job with Global Playground, kind of working in tandem with OYE organization and Students Helping Honduras, SHH, another nonprofit that was working in the area. And I was it was very ambiguous exactly what my role was. I moved down to Progreso with you. We move in together. I start initiating some project through Global Playground in my position, and about 2 months in, there's all kinds of violence breaking out. We had a shooting in one of the little village, pueblitos, little towns that I was working in. There were multiple shootings on in front of our house. During those first couple months, Sam and I used to go up on the roof of our house and hang out at night, and you could literally see shootings taking place on our roof, because we had the tallest house in the neighborhood.
We had the watchtower.
Yeah, you could see this shit going down, and my organization would ask for a weekly report of the state of things, not only my job but also
what's going on in
the safety situation, right? And so about 2 months in, they want to evacuate the program, and they either wanted me to go back and take a job at their administrative office in DC, or send me off to start a similar initiative in Uganda. But I turned down Peace Corps in Peru because I wanted to be specifically with Sam and my sister in Honduras. So I just stayed there for the next 6-8 months on my own dime, just kind of finishing up those projects to some extent, but also did a lot of hanging out.
Did a lot of hanging out.
I know I'm gonna have the mandate from my bosses, and I was there on my own dime, so I did my, I did work on continuing some of those projects, but not nearly with the same vigor as I was before.
Put together a great curriculum teaching photography.
Yeah, we did some digital editing, put together some volleyball tournaments, did a survey on the impact of OYE on students that had graduated from the organization. That was kind of my favorite thing. But really, more than anything, just being part of Honduran society. I kind of wrapped it up, I think, right after you left.
Yeah.
So Sam and I lived together for the next several months. For about a year, we ended up living together in Honduras. Morgan as well was down in San Pedro. And then we all kind of dipped out right around... No, Morgan stayed down there after we left. You dipped out toward the beginning of summer 2014.
Yep.
And I left a few weeks after you, summer 2014.
Yep.
So we kind of touched on this earlier. How do you reflect back on your time in Honduras? Obviously, we talked about how violent it was. You saw crazy shit. My sister's seen more crazy shit than all of us. We'll get her to touch on that.
Yeah.
Specifically, I can talk about our buddy Joe French, who was a Honduran American down there teaching art, actually at an English school up on the coast, and he got shot in the head, stomach, and chest for his iPhone right outside his house in a town called Puerto Cortez. And so we were intimately involved in some crazy shit. But there's also a positive side of that as well. You touched on, you feel like you're hot shit down there. You feel like this little mini celebrity because you're the white guy in this town where there's no other white guys, and everyone kind of almost looks up to you an extent because, I don't know, you're fucking American. It's kind of fucked up, but you can't help but kind of get a high off of that. When I look back and coming back from Honduras, you feel kind of rattled when you come back. Like, it's definitely a sense of relief when you come back to the States. Like, I've got a hot shower. I can go get any kind of food I want at the grocery store. I can have shit delivered to my house. Everything's far more accessible. Like, life is easier.
Yeah.
But it does also feel like you're coming off a drug and, like, you want to, like, you miss it. Do you feel that way? Like, do you miss it?
Oh, totally. I mean, it's, you know, when I look back now, I rarely think about the violence or, like, when I think about, like, living in Honduras, I just think about, I was having a great time. You know, I was living with some good friends. I was living with you or with Morgan. I was dating Kata. I was, like, hanging out with her family. I think about, and I was working at Oye. I loved working at Oye. I could wake up most days and feel really good about the work I was doing and going in and doing it and why and seeing this bigger picture. And I was learning a lot about the culture and history and people, and I was just having a all around a pretty good time. While I was there, and maybe I wasn't learning quite as much towards the end as I was at the beginning, where it's just like sensory information overload, and it's like every day it's something brand new. At some point, it's like, yeah, we got long periods where it felt like nothing's happening.
Right.
And it's a lot harder to do stuff there than it was, or than it is in the being in a city in the U.S. If I was living in Holden,
right,
I might feel something different.
Right.
But there's a lot more stuff, and it's a lot safer and easier to do stuff in the U.S. So
it's like walking through mud, man.
You take things for granted in the U.S. that you don't in Honduras. Like, if you go to a concert in Honduras, it's like you had to, like, plan and, like, figure out, like, how you're gonna get from El Progreso to San Pedro. What car were you gonna use? When were you gonna catch the bus? Like, how did you get there? Like, oh, was it okay? You got there. How did you get to the concert? And, like, who had the ticket? Where was it? It's like nothing quite, like, is as easy as it should be. So whenever we do anything like that, it was always like, you know, maybe it even seemed way better than it actually was.
It
does. And then in hindsight, you look back on it and you're just like, wow, like, we were having a great time. There's definitely moments when we were there where it was like, no, we were just like, it was just Alex and I sitting on the roof, just hanging out, just watching the grass grow, watching the iguanas sun themselves.
Watching the iguanas tan.
Yeah. And, you know, so it's looking back on it, it's like my glasses are really rosy. I remember I went back down in January of this year, and you know, a lot of stuff kind of came back to me, and I was like, oh shit, like, actually it was kind of a pain in the butt to, like, go to the grocery store. It was kind of like a pain in the ass to, like, go to bed at night because it's still 105 degrees and there's, like, no AC, and, you know, you just like realize, like, oh, okay, yeah, no, it's not quite as good as I remember it.
Yeah.
It also, you know, is never that bad. It's like we can survive and we can thrive doing, like, literally anything or anywhere. I mean, we have people who live in the desert in Phoenix. We have people who live in, like, Maine. We have people who live in, like, Alaska and Canada. And, like, really put us in any climate, we're gonna have fun. We're gonna, like, do stuff. But it was tough. It's a tough place to live. But then coming back, there's totally different things I was dealing with. So, like, the transition back to living in the U.S. was, like, not easy for me. First of all, like, I moved back in with my parents. Couldn't get a job for a while. You know, went from having sort of that ego boost of being unique and different to being just another, like, white dude in a white state in a pretty white country, less so now. And it's like that, you know, it was a bit of a shock. Like I didn't transition smoothly back into the U.S. And I had a good friend, Anders, who came back from Chile at the same time, and you were back, right? You went back to your mom's place.
Yeah, kind of. Well, kind of. I went to Costa Rica for the summer right after Honduras. So I had a couple months in Costa Rica. Then I took that job with Pan Am Post, doing, like, journalism stuff. So I was bouncing around. Yeah, I was kind of at my mom's place a little bit, bouncing around, kind of like your friend Haley does now, working from a computer. But then then after that, though, I did my Central America trip where I just kind of went through Central America bouncing around. So yeah, my transition was a little more smooth because I did take the Costa Rica job. I did take this this journalism job that had me kind of just traveling around, so I wasn't just like immediately thrust back into like normal life. I had this like still nomadic lifestyle. Then I did the Central America trip, which obviously kept me still on it. But it was about I guess a year after we left that I did end up back in my mom's place for a few months. And it's like, the biggest thing for me, dude, it's like every day in Honduras, regardless of like whether or not you get that much accomplished professionally,
you did something because you had to.
Yeah, right. Like there's no running water, and there's a lot of times there's no running water. Every day there's no potable drinking water. So like you have to walk, a mile to go get a giant jug of water and throw it on your shoulder and haul it back to your house. You have a tiny little fridge if you have a fridge at all, and so you have to go to a grocery store and wait in like a super long line, and be super careful about which route you're taking and at what time of day you're taking it so you don't get a gun stuck in your face. It's like every day you felt like you were surviving, so even at the end of the day, if you really hadn't accomplished anything, there was a sense of fulfillment that you I did survived and made it. I lived today. You felt like you're living every day. You come back to the US and everything is just there. Like your survival and your comfort is like a given.
Yep.
Right? In Honduras, comfort just doesn't exist, right? You're always hot, you're always sweaty, there may be electricity, there may be running water. It's like comfort is never given. If you can attain this sense of comfort, that's like a major accomplishment, right? Like if you can at the end of the day sit down and like chill and watch a movie on Netflix, it is like the taste is so much sweeter because like it's not a given.
Right, and you might, you could lose power at any minute.
Exactly. And then you come back in the U.S. and you can just plop down on your couch, eat whatever you want, have super fast Wi-Fi, wake up in the morning and go to the gym without any roadblock, speed bumps in the way. Like your comfortable existence is a given. And so then now you get put in this position back in the U.S. where it's like, fuck. Now you feel like obligated to achieve something. You feel obligated to meet some higher standard. Whether or not it's attaining a higher level of education or attaining some sort of financial gain or advancing your romantic relationship to a next level. It's like you feel like in order to feel this self-actualization and sense of fulfillment, you feel like you have to jump up to another level in some way. That's how I feel. And I'm still struggling with that because I'm looking back on it now, I'm trying to decide what I want to do with my life. I'm like, fuck, am I taking this job because it's actually what I want to do and it's going to make me happy, or am I just doing that because I feel an obligation to reach this next level of fulfillment? Am I staying in this relationship with this girl because I actually love this girl and this is what I want for my life, or because I feel like that's my obligation as a member of this society? Yeah,
in some ways I totally agree. In other ways, I guess that just sort of introduces other questions to my mind. One is hey, are we achieving something by, are you improving yourself or making yourself better just by existing? In Honduras, where it's hey, it was a bit of a struggle. I had to persevere just to reach the comfort level of being able to watch Netflix at the end of the day and go to sleep comfortably in my bed with a fan on me. Is that a form of self-improvement? Were you improving yourself just by being able to do that? And if you don't, it's what is self-improvement? Does that mean you're getting a new job? Does it mean you're learning a new skill? Does it mean you're just learning more? What is it? Why? So not only why do we do it, but what is it?
Right. No, I don't know. I don't have an answer to that. I don't necessarily think you're saying that it is a sense of self-improvement. The only thing I could say it is, or where it would be a sense of self-improvement, is if you can take that experience of the discomfort and the challenge of living in a place like Honduras, and you can bring it back to wherever you set up shop for the next chapter of your life, and really harness that sense of appreciation or the lessons learned, and allow it to elevate you to another level as a human being. I don't necessarily think I've done that. So I guess the short answer to your question, am I a better person or am I an improved person because of that? Not necessarily.
So I was thinking about this the other day. Someone was asking, I had a bar of soap and it was on the floor of the shower.
Mm-hmm.
in a certain spot where it doesn't get super wet. Because if it's on the rack in the shower, it just gets soaked whenever the faucet's on. And it's like it's just like
gelatinous mess.
Yeah, it's just a mess. So I like to put it in this one spot, but it's on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
And a roommate was like, "Hey, do you want like I put your soap up like on the rack?" And I was like, "Oh, like it's gonna ruin the soap."
Right.
And it was like, has my standard just been lowered? Like, should I get a box to put the soap in so it doesn't sit on the floor? Because her thing was like, well, don't you think it's gonna be dirty sitting on the floor? And I was like dirty, and I'm like thinking about like, what do I think is dirty now? And like I think it back to like all my showers that I had in Honduras that were
showering out of a bucket.
Some of them were gross. Like
gross.
Showered out of a rusty bucket.
Dude, the bucket, the oil tin that we showered out of that first time down there, that was like literally growing fucking amoebas
break
and like
out with rashes. And I was like, nah, I don't think that the soap will get dirty if I'm using it every day and it sits like on a pretty dry spot on the floor of the shower. And I thought like, but that grosses you out.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe I can get a box and like I'll just do that for you, because so you're not like looking at that and like that's gross. There's soap on the floor. And then I just wondered about like myself, and I was like, so did that either improve me as being like less worried about like germs, like oh like I know I can survive and it's not gonna hurt me, or did it just make me lower my standards? And so at the same time, I think I'm very much more appreciative of like we're sitting at a picnic table. It's, you know, we described the place a little bit. Alex probably has a picture of where we are on his phone. Maybe he'll be able to share that.
Fishing and it's industrial park? I don't
it's
know
like
what this is.
Pretty industrial.
Oh, that's a badass sailboat that's
but there's
going
like
by
a pretty
right now.
boat going by us, and the temperature's nice, and in the distance I can see some, you know, like hardwood foliage, trees, and like rooftops, and like there's a lot of beauty here, and it's a nice day.
And there's no concern whatsoever for our safety right now.
I'm not worried about anything, and I'm really appreciative of this moment, being able to do this, and like I'm not worried about anything. I'm not gonna get arrested. I'm not gonna get, you know, robbed. I'm not, you know, I feel great, and that's something that I wouldn't have even thought twice about before.
Yeah.
So, you know, is that a lower standard, or is that just being more appreciative and more in the present, and having a different perspective?
Right.
So, you know, I think it's something that I kind of think I'm a much better person now than I was like when I was in college and like before I did Honduras, before I did, you know, whatever else I've done. But you know, whether it's am I striving as much? Are my dreams as big? Probably. I don't know.
Right.
But I think I just appreciate the moment a lot more and in a different way. Does that make any sense?
Totally, dude. I think I'm makes me very fucking happy to hear you say that, because I don't necessarily know that I can concur with you. I'm certainly a less psychologically stable individual than you, so I think that definitely plays a role in it. But I will say for me, like the biggest takeaway for me is like nothing rattles me anymore. Slap me in my head. Sam just slapped me in my fucking forehead.
We got a bug off his forehead. Did that rattle you?
Nah, dude. I'm good. I'm rolling with it. Like nothing rattles me anymore. For instance, like now, I'm unemployed and I am homeless, and I have no plan for my life whatsoever. Like literally, the only thing I know that I want to do with my life is interview my friends for this quote unquote podcast, right? Which I haven't even put online, or I haven't even edited any of these fucking things. Who knows if these things will ever see the light of day, right? They sit on a fucking SD card for
at least you
eternity.
don't have cassette tapes you need to lug around with yourself,
dude. So, but like, I'm totally cool with that, because I have had the experience of living in a place where the vast majority of that population would kill to be in the position I am right now as a college-educated, white, homeless, unemployed man. Like,
with U.S. citizenship.
With U.S. citizenship, with a passport that can take me to literally any fucking place on the planet.
Yeah.
Like, what you could say is like my lowest point ever.
Could we say that? I don't know.
No, I've been to lower
How well
points.
do I know you?
Certainly been to lower points. But like ostensibly what would be, you would think would be like a low point from like the societal standards of like our peer group, right? Of people with white people with master's degrees in the United States, right? This, like, people that we used to work with and some of our closest friends and romantic partners this would be like their dream scenario.
Yeah.
This would be like the position I am right now would literally be a dream come true.
This is amazing. Yep.
And so while I don't dwell with that sentiment on like a second by second, day-to-day basis. Like that state of mind and that understanding isn't necessarily like constantly in my head. I do refer back to that on a daily basis when like I am worrying or I am becoming neurotic or I am feeling sorry for myself or whatever. I do always refer back like dude, you may think like you're in a bad spot right now. Like you may think you're directionless and floating in the wind, and I am very in a lot of ways, but like it's two sides of the same coin, man. Look at the other side of that coin. Like appreciate how fortunate you are. Recognize how like the vast majority of the global population would love to be in your position right now as an unemployed homeless man, sitting on a fishing industrial park and sitting in a parking lot in Portland, Maine.
Well, and you're also unemployed by choice.
Right, exactly.
When was the last time you applied for a job?
I guess last summer.
DCI.
Yeah, DCI.
Yeah, so you got 100% of the jobs you just applied for.
Yeah, I've never been unemployed I've never been involuntarily unemployed,
right.
And I don't think I ever would be. Like, I could
so
always
it's
get like
there's an easy way out.
Totally, right.
And there almost always will be.
Right, it's an incredibly privileged position to be in, dude. Incredibly privileged position to be in. Just the passport itself, dude. That's the biggest thing for me. The perhaps the greatest tragedy that I have unearthed in my life that is a constantly sense of like bewilderment to me as I go through life is this notion in the system we have on this planet where like
because
billions of people are born in a certain plot of dirt, which is, has been outlined by these arbitrary borders. They are forced to stay in that tiny arbitrarily outlined patch of dirt just because they happen to pop out of a vagina in that geographical area.
It's so absurd.
And us, because we happen to pop out of vagina in this arbitrary geographical area, we have the ability to then not only go wherever, but we have access to opportunities that most people wouldn't even dream of.
Yep.
It's fucking incredible, dude.
It's insane.
It's insane. It's fucking insane.
It's insane. I was thinking about that when I went down to Cuba. I was just thinking about like if you're born like in one place and it's like, I in high school, in beginning of college, like I thought, oh, Cuba, like the revolutionary, like they are the antithesis of the United States in so many ways, and like that's interesting and intriguing if you've ever like questioned stuff in your own country. But then when you get there and you realize the restrictions on movement, the restrictions in how a different system works, and it's like there's some stuff I appreciate about being born in this country, and I think to a huge degree it's freedom, and it's a freedom that a lot of people will unfortunately never really know or have the chance to appreciate.
Most people.
But it's the ability to travel, it's the ability to move not only domestically between states so easily, but to so many countries, the purchasing power, the wages, being born into a global power is like so incredibly advantageous to Americans, to a lot of Europeans, and then you can be a global power, but from a country like China, and you can't. If you're born in a rural area, you may not even be able to move to like Shanghai. Mm-hmm. You might not even be able to move around domestically in that country.
Totally.
Because there's a different sense of rights, of freedom, of ability to move, and like those restrictions I think are just absurd. It's crazy how hard it is for a Honduran to come to the United States. Mm-hmm. It's crazy that we have these borders that like in some sense like they don't or shouldn't even exist. Mm-hmm. I mean, the border between Mexico and the U.S., like literally as soon as we drew a border, we separated families. It's not like
it's fucking
separating
insane.
Families is a new thing. We've been doing that as soon as we started making territories, making borders. It's absurd.
Yeah, personally, I think it's the greatest injustice that exists on the planet, the existence of borders. What the fuck is this? Like, how antiquated of a fucking system is this? That we have these arbitrary lines in the dirt that totally separate, like, worlds, like create different worlds and states of existence, and it fucking blows my mind, man.
So I was wrestling with this question, I guess with a couple of my roommates, not too long ago, and where we started arriving was what happens if you have a border, say between Cuba and the U.S. and I'd love to use two other countries that were much more similar in size but share a border, but you have very different governing systems, and there's free movement of people. People can go wherever they want.
Mm-hmm.
They can decide they want to live somewhere.
Mm.
Can they vote? How do you, if they can't vote, what rights do they just extend all rights? Do they, if they enter your country, do they get they're not a voting or are they a voting citizen? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So it's where I get confused around borders, and I think we should get rid of borders, but that's totally eliminating the fact that we all have different governing systems too, isn't it?
Right, yeah.
And then how do you do something like national security? Does that
Right.
exist? Should a government provide security?
Right.
If we don't have borders,
Right.
and who are they protecting then?
Right. Yeah. So yeah, that it's easy for like open borders people, of which I consider myself, is like just eliminate borders, right? And we have free movement. I can go to Mexico. Mexican can come here. It's just let's just travel back and forth, and everyone can pick the spot they want to live, and then things will kind of take care of themselves. Right. But as soon as you eliminate borders, you're opening up. That's the very beginning of the fucking situation. Like you're opening up Pandora's box at that point,
right.
Because it's not just eliminating the borders and creating freedom of movement. It's now elimination of an entire way of existence from like a structural and governmental level. Yeah. I don't have the answer for you, but no, I think once you eliminate borders, it's not just like we're eliminating borders. You're deconstructing modern existence as we know it. Civilization as we know it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying, like, when I was thinking about, because obviously the U.S.-Mexico border is something that it's in the news all the time. It's something I've been thinking about for years, because so many students from Honduras that we were working with that Alex and I knew personally. I mean, Alex has a crazy story about Hector.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's been told or if you want to tell
No, I
want
to get Hector on the podcast, though.
I mean,
as a young kid that we lived in our neighborhood when we first were down in Honduras, that we kind of just brought in and made sure he's going to school and kind of adopted him and let him sleep in our house and stuff. And we constantly stayed in touch with when we were back in the U.S. and then ultimately got brought up by what's called a coyote, a human trafficker, essentially. From Honduras through Central America up through Mexico. Very traditional story. Immigrated illegally across the border. Ended up getting detained by border security.
He actually was an unaccompanied minor.
He actually was, yes, as an unaccompanied minor. Ended up in like one of these child prisons that have been in the news recently for a few months. Ended up getting resettled with a family member in Atlanta. Actually ended up getting resettled literally 5 minutes away from my mom's house in suburban Atlanta.
Yeah.
Like fucking crazy, full circle story.
Dude lived a 5-minute walk away from their house in Honduras. Right. Ends up resettled at a house 5 minutes away from their mom's house in Atlanta, Georgia.
Insane shit. That's a whole nother story. I want to get that kid in the podcast whenever I start I want to start a Spanish version of this, but I should probably get the English one up first.
Estamos ahora.
Empezamos ahorita. But yeah. So yeah, this whole question.
Yeah. So it's been in the news. It's something that I feel a connection. I've had my own struggles with the border and trying to get Kata up here. Yeah.
Kata, Sam's ex-girlfriend from Honduras.
And that was, like a long process. And ultimately, the reason, I'm not dating her is she couldn't come to the U.S.
Dude, we haven't even touched on that. That's a beautiful, emblematic emblematic of all of this, right? Like, this is a girl who you love, who you have an intimate, long-term relationship with. Why can't y'all be together? The only reason you're not together now is because of the existence of these arbitrary borders. She can't come and be with the person that she loves because of this fucking arbitrary line in the sand. What the fuck is this?
Yeah.
What is she inherently, like a criminal or like a leech on society because she was born in this several hundred or several thousand miles to the south?
Miles south.
What the fuck, man?
It's absurd. It's totally absurd, and it's like, So that's just a topic that I've been thinking
It's very close to home for you, obviously.
Yeah, I would say
not just a philosophical thing for you as it is for me. I guess I do have
a
personal.
Even for you, I would say you
have students,
so many students, so many people whose lives are directly impacted and affected by this, and even for your sister, for Morgan. I mean, she's dating a Canadian. That's a lot easier than someone from Honduras, but
still presenting major logistical challenges.
There's still logistical challenges, so it's like he can't just come here and get a job.
Right.
They can't do
Nor
that.
can she in Canada.
And she can in Canada or the EU.
Yeah.
Which he can, right?
But she can because he's French-Canadian.
French-Canadian, yeah.
Which is like makes it even more ridiculous. Oh, because he's born in this part of Canada, he can now get a job in the EU. Like, what the fuck is going on here?
Canadians have it dialed in, man.
What are we doing here?
Canadians are the North American Europeans.
Dude, it's so fucking outrageous, man. It's fucking outrageous. And obviously it's easy to sit here and criticize the system. And it's always easy to criticize any problem without presenting another solution.
But that's a fascinating case, though. Like looking at Antoine and Morgan.
Morgan's boyfriend.
Antoine's Morgan's boyfriend from Montreal. And, Morgan's obviously from Atlanta. And, he's very well educated, master's degree, I think.
Yep.
That he got in like Scotland or something.
Right, whatever.
And he can work
university.
in Europe. Morgan could volunteer there and had a visa.
I think she's on like kind of
like a
under the
stipend
table
kind of thing or something?
tourism visa, got paid in cash type situation. Right, you just all on.
Yeah.
So we're preventing highly educated humanitarian workers
that are
absolutely
absolutely needed at like a refugee camp in Greece, and she can't be there.
We're making it as difficult as possible
It's difficult for her to be there. It's difficult for her to work, like anywhere in Europe. She can't go to Belgium. She can't go. It's like that's absurd. And that's even for extremely well educated. She got like 1+ master's. She's working on like a second master's degree, or doctor. Is it a doctorate in midwifery?
Yeah.
And she can't like go to Europe and work.
Dude, that entire situation, I think is so emblematic of the problem, right? So you've got a couple, one from Canada, one from the United States, both highly educated, going to work in Europe, one working in a place that could not be in more desperate need of people to help out, but can't do so without a ton of bureaucratic involvement. It's virtually impossible to do so.
Yep.
And now you're not even, but then you've got the personal relationship of them being from two different countries, now in a third country. It's just like this clusterfuck of bureaucracy that doesn't need to exist. We had a similar issue in Honduras, right? Like we were essentially humanitarian workers living in Honduras. We had to get paid in cash kind of under the table with this stipend situation. And then every 3 months, we got kicked out of the country and had to fly back to the United States, essentially using like all of our monthly salary to do so.
Right.
It's because you can't be in the country for more than 3 months at a time, even though we're there, like giving our blood, sweat, and tears to help the community.
I'm gonna be honest though, I sort of appreciated those opportunities
it was nice.
to travel. I went down to Costa Rica. I went down
but that's when it used.
I went down to Panama. I went over to.
Well,
I was supposed to go to Belize. I didn't quite make it there, but we worked something out.
Well, it used to be you could just leave the country, right? You could just hop across the border for Guatemala for 24 hours and come back.
You always have to leave the C4.
Not always. That was a new thing once we got down there.
When they didn't really do the stamps correctly.
Right. I guess probably post-coup, no one was really paying attention. But yeah, you couldn't. But then by the time we got down there, you couldn't go to a country. You had to go to a country that didn't border that didn't border Honduras.
Yeah, you had to get outside of Nicaragua, El Salvador, and Guatemala.
Ugh.
And Honduras, obviously Honduras. But no, that was nuts.
Yeah, man, it's a fucking mess. And as Americans, we don't, you don't really think about it because America's fucking awesome.
It's like, why don't we just like watch like, you should watch like a reality television show, like Desperate Housewives, and like get your dose of the U.S. That should be enough to get your passport stamped. Right? Like, oh, you watched that? Okay, that's worse than going. Yeah. That's worse than going to.
Yeah. It's almost like we're like lulled into this state of ignorance in this country because it's very easy to live here. And it's so fucking big, and there's such a wide variety of places to visit within our own borders, right?
Yeah.
There's really I was thinking that I was planning this summer to do another international trip right after the school year ended. And then kind of dawned on me, I was like, fuck, I've never been like north of New York. Never been to Boston. I've never been to New England in any way. I've certainly never been to Maine where like my best friend is from. Like, I'm going to do that instead. And there's still massive expanse of this country I've never seen.
Yeah.
So it's like a lot of people go throughout life with never even considering like what exists beyond our borders. There's really no need to, and it's not a judgment, on my part if you don't. But I think it is like super informative and super, enriching part of the human experience to at least like ponder what life is like in places outside of this country, and especially in places that are less fortunate than this country.
Yeah, this has been a big domestic travel year for me, and most of it through work. But
Right.
like Phoenix, I went to, never been out there, and travel around, Sedona, whatever. Colorado, never been to Colorado. Going up to Columbus, Ohio, never been there. I've been out to St. Louis a bunch. I'm heading to Minneapolis, like all these places, a lot kind of in the Midwest area or West. Jackson, Wyoming, never been out there. That was beautiful. And it's amazing, sort of the diversity of and natural beauty for sure of the U.S. And the diversity shocks me too, because now you see where I'm from. This is not D.C.
No.
This is not Miami. This is not Jackson,
It's a whole different
Wyoming.
world, dude.
It's a totally different world. This is not Atlanta. For all my friends down in the ATL, all of Alex's buddies, we are not in Atlanta
We're
right
not
now.
in Atlanta right now, dude. But that also is the beautiful part about the U.S., right? It's like
It's
this,
a cool
this
thing.
land of 1,000 different worlds.
It's a cool thing, but there is some homogeneity or some
Right. There's a common thread that runs throughout.
There's a real thread that's pulled throughout this country, and I think it's important to get a different perspective.
Totally.
So if people have the opportunity, I think
Take
they
advantage
should
of it,
always
man.
travel.
Dude, okay, so let's wrap this thing up by kind of talking about the future and like your thoughts on the future. Let's start first, like kind of connecting
Flying cars.
our past experience.
We will colonize Mars.
So
I will be a space cowboy.
we left off in your personal timeline with in the kind of timeline that's guided this podcast, with like your transition back to the U.S. And you said like you had trouble getting a job at first. Eventually you went back to school and got your master's degree. And then now, though, you're working in like consulting in like a much more traditional, I guess, more corporate environment than like you ever have before, right?
Yeah.
So talk about how you feel about what you're doing now professionally, what your professional aspirations are for the future, and do you ever envision yourself like dipping your toe back into like something wild and adventurous like what you were doing in Honduras? And like, is that passion still there? Is that desire still there? Or what do you professionally, at least, like what do you envision for yourself?
Yeah. Went back to grad school, studied policy and international affairs, University of Maine. Got to do some cool trips while I was there. I went to India for a wedding. That was pretty sweet. That was just a fun trip though. And then I went to Kyrgyzstan to do some pretty interesting research. And that was really a direction that I enjoyed a lot. And it was sort of investigating potential for violent extremism or assessing what potential projects could you do for countering violent extremism in Central Asia. And what we were looking at was migrants who had gone to Russia, and there was an economic collapse in Russia, and they had been sending remittances back to Kyrgyzstan. What was happening with the population in Kyrgyzstan? Was it becoming more vulnerable? There's sort of an ethnic division in Kyrgyzstan, and were there ethnic tensions? What were some of the potential contributing factors to the rise of violence and violent extremists in Kyrgyzstan? And really the reason we had focused on that region was a lot of Kyrgyz were popping up in Syria associated with ISI.
Okay.
And so that was a pretty fascinating project and process to design that research, and that's an area that I'm still very interested in, and there's a lot of corollary between that and youth development. So a lot of the work that we were doing in Honduras was sort of focused on preventing youth from joining gangs or becoming involved in sort of the criminal world, criminal elements there. And so there's a public health lens, there's this research side of it, there were all these things that were sort of coming together for me there that I'm still very interested in and would love to do something in that area in the future. While I was in grad school, as I said, I had trouble finding work immediately, that dream job that I thought was going to be handed to me, and I came back because I was killing it down there. But what I did end up finding was a job with this consulting company that does, in our words, Brimstone Consulting Group. We develop strategy, we work on leadership development and team alignment, and we do those three things simultaneously for organizations, and organizations in the most broad sense, everything from the tiny NGO, a tiny NGO-like organization for youth empowerment like Oye. We could work with them all the way up to, a massive government contractor or automobile manufacturer. And, I've sort of had the opportunity to work with all of those companies in between, or companies and organizations in between that full spectrum. And that's been pretty fascinating to me because I love the opportunity to go in to an organization that I know nothing about, learn about it, and really what we focus on are the people and the process that they use to develop strategy. So it's not so much that I will ever be the expert on any of these businesses, but what we provide is insight, benchmarking, and we help people navigate each other to produce the best outcome, and really deliver business results. So we help them, get the senior team in the room, help them work through interpersonal issues that they may have, give them opportunities and exercises to build as a team, and give them the space to have a great dialogue and help them have that conversation and help them think about their strategy and their business. A lot of it is observing people and behaviors, which I think is pretty fascinating. And it takes, I would say, a high emotional intelligence level to watch people and how they're reacting and when they're engaging, and if they're not engaging, why did they disengage? Is there someone in the room who has something that they need to get out, but for whatever reason they can't? Are they being shut down by somebody? Are they just not being listened to? If they're not being listened to, is there a reason behind that?
Damn.
Should they be there?
Like a counselor for businesses.
Yeah, so we're like a
group therapy sessions.
Like it's so some people it could be organizational development. Some people call it organizational psychology.
I like that.
It's a pretty interesting field, and I wouldn't say I'm an academic in it by any means now, but I've definitely been reading a lot more about organizations and org structure and process consulting, and dabbling into psychology. A lot of it is also, we'll work with personality assessments. How do personalities communicate? How do they get along with each other? What are their different communication preferences? So it's definitely brought me into this new field of psychology and social sciences a little bit. That's pretty new to me, and I'd never thought about it before. It's in some ways totally divergent from youth development. In other ways, it's like the same shit. Right. When we were working at Oye, we were designing, we were trying to create the environment for a disparate, diverse group of kids to come together and, foster new talents, build a sense of community, develop as leaders in their communities, and give something back.
That's very true. I never that a parallel never really occurred to me.
And I don't think that what I'm doing with this company is really any different. Right. I'm just working with adults. Right. Who can have bigger egos. Right. And we're talking about a lot of money. Right. We're not talking about paintbrushes and microphones. Right. And so it's been interesting. My personal struggle with it has definitely been around the balance between social good and value creation. Right. and what would you do? You know, where do you draw the line? What is the business's objective? Are they, you know, doing this just to make money? Are they keeping the customers? Or this serving a social need in mind? And what I've been a little bit surprised to find is I think most businesses exist because there is a need or a want in the world. Right. Otherwise, no one's buying Dunkin' Donuts. If you don't want coffee, you're not getting Dunkin' Donuts.
Right. They're fulfilling a need in the marketplace. They're fulfilling a demand.
If they don't do that, if they don't put their customers first, if they don't think about that, if they don't try to think ahead and strategically, which today means, you know, being more sustainable, being, you know, providing more probably equal access, thinking about quality, thinking about price. If they're not doing those things, which are probably better for almost everyone, then they're probably not going to survive as a company. So there's this huge onus on a lot of businesses today to, you know, not pollute the environment, to not do these things. So that's, you know, I feel good in that sense, but it's not the same as doing work that, you know, you have a direct and visceral sense that you're doing something positive on a daily, every day. Right. If I focus on the individual people I'm working with, that can be much more fulfilling. Right. But it's this thing where I've learned a lot. I really enjoy it. There's an itch in me to go and do something that's a little bit different, that I'll feel like I'm having a bit more of a direct impact and giving something of myself to the world and making it a better place. Right. But I'm enjoying it a lot.
So I want to guide you kind of in another direction, because how you close it out there is exactly what I was kind of thinking of my next question, but you kind of answered already. How do you envision the convergence of this kind of itch, as you described it, this desire to have more of an impact, and it seems maybe even like more of a sense of adventure, kind of, or excitement?
Hell yeah.
Okay. I guess you could do that personally, right? In your own free time, you could perhaps maybe get that fix. But how do you envision you converging that desire to have an impact and more adventure in your life, and then also working towards your personal life as now you're entering your 30s? Because it would be easier in terms of like personal fulfillment, in terms of like settling down, starting a family, to stay in the line of work you are now, it would seem like, right? Like you've got this job that pays well, you're comfortable with, you're learning and growing in this position. So what I see, for instance, for most of the people that I grew up with, their decision-making process would be stay where I am, continue to grow, because this is like an easier path to like settle down and move into traditional adulthood. Knowing you, however, you're much more similar to me in my decision-making process, right? We tend to make more extremist decisions, take more chances, what I would consider like more fearless, but also perhaps like more naive. I don't know. So how do you envision that? Like at some point, do you want to settle down, get married, start a family? If so, how do you envision that going in line with like your professional decision making?
Yeah. So, geez, I might have to break this down into a couple parts.
Do it.
First, I'll just hit the last one. Do I want to settle down, start a family, get married, not get married, have a partner, whatever it is? Yeah, one day I would love to have a wife and produce children. I don't think that I am. Yeah, I'm just gonna produce a dozen. I might have a couple wives to do that. No, but yeah, no. One day I'd like to have a family. I don't see it in my cards in the near future.
What's near future to you? 5-10 years? 5 years?
You know, I'd love to think after 5 years, maybe I'd be getting like really close.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way.
But you know, who knows? Would the logical path to being able to do that be to stay in my career now? I think that was another question. If that is an end goal, is this the quickest way there, or the best route? Right. In some ways, I think this is potentially a nice conservative and safe route for me to go.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at.
Financially secure.
Totally.
It's been going well for me. I've been getting, increasingly more roles and responsibility within the organization. A lot of opportunities like that. what I've also found is that's meant I travel a ton.
Right.
So, like, dating is impossible.
Right.
Like, I can go on a date, and then if it's a great date, I might not see that person for like 2 or 3 weeks.
Right.
And that's like, I don't think you can kindle a lot of romantic relationships like that. So that, you know, maybe I'm sure I could find a balance somehow, staying in the same company, in the same similar role. You know, do I think that's the direction I want to go? No, I think I would get crazy bored.
Okay.
I either see one or two, or, you know, probably 3 different avenues that I can take. One is, I'd be interested in sort of building my own practice within this company.
Okay.
Where it would be a little bit more focused on international organizations or cross-cultural work.
Okay.
And that would help me factor in some of the adventure.
Right.
And, you know, traveling abroad, and I'd love to work with international development organizations, and whether that's their, you know, like global strategy, or going out and doing sort of project teamwork, or helping even with design and implementation philosophy for programs they already have running. I think some of that stuff could be pretty fascinating and cool. And I think there's some things that we do that are totally applicable to that. That would be one potential avenue. I think another one would be, hey, let's blow it up completely, and I'm just going to go do something totally different. And knowing me, that's like a path I've probably likely to choose.
Yeah.
Like, I'll just be like, okay.
I'm out.
Like, and then I think the other one is, I'm curious, and maybe it's hey, I sort of want to do both of those things, and it's, can I get to a point where I can take like a sabbatical year?
Got you.
And go and do something like Peace Corps responding to that beautiful rainbow.
Oh shit!
Over the moon. It ends on the moon.
Damn! I don't know if my iPhone could capture so quick, and Sam's in like a fucking great.
Can I do?
You're in a great monologue right now. Ooh, that might work though. But yeah, dude, we're looking over this harbor. Once again, we're in like a industrial park, so it's a great.
This is like 2.5 hours later.
It's like a great juxtaposition of kind of scenes here. Like behind us, we've got, I don't know, some sort of massive plow. I don't know, like building. Air compressor, like blaring away. But in front of us, man, we're staring out into this harbor with all these beautiful sailboats. The sun is setting. We've got this beautiful turquoise fishing boat coming across, like so, I don't know, like almost like stereotypical of what you'd see in a harbor in Maine. And then, like I said, the sun is setting. We've got a nice light blue sky, some nice gray white cloud mix, and then this arching rainbow right over our head that's going from one side of the harbor to the other, and then the far right side of the rainbow literally ends on top of the moon. It's fucking incredible.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
Holy shit, and the sun's now coming down, is kind of gleaning off the water. Wow.
Seagulls flying overhead.
Talk about appreciating like where you are.
Appreciate the moment, Alex.
Holy
like you're getting
shit.
it.
Oh yeah. Jesus, I'm like literally getting goosebumps. Holy fuck, man. Wow. Fuck. Go back to talk about consulting. Tell us more about consulting.
What you need to understand about the American corporation is it runs off of coffee and donuts. And if you want to get ahead.
Holy shit. Okay.
No, but it's the hey, can I do both paths?
Right.
Can I do a sabbatical year? Can I go and do something like Peace Corps response?
Right.
Can I, and will that be either a bridge to something else? Will it, you know, just scratch that itch and then I can go back? I don't know. But that's kind of what I'm thinking about now is, hey, how do I take, you know, what I've learned here from this experience and roll into something new and different and get a little bit more of that thrill that I'm looking for. Mm-hmm. Do something with a little bit more risk, but I don't know. I am thinking, you know, hey, I am 30. You know, at some point it might be cool to like own a house or like have like more assets than like the clothes I wear on my back,
right?
And a laptop that Brimstone owns. But you know, on the other hand, I just, I do. I just want to live and like live an unconventional life and enjoy it.
Good. I kind of want to stop there.
I think that's an end.
I think that is an end. I'm going to add a little addendum to it, though. Living an unconventional life, that's what he says. So Sam is a very unique friend of mine, and I've repeated now a few times that, like, he doesn't live a traditional lifestyle. And I just don't want you to ever give up on that, dude. Like, you are such a shining source of hope for me because I really don't have any other friends that are like that. And I know I'm like that. And it's not just for me personally. Like, I don't want you to, like, continue to think this way so I can, like, feel like I'm not, like, a total outcast from society. I really do genuinely feel in my heart of hearts that, like, there's a lot of value in living like that. And that's, like, it really elevates your human experience. It expands your human experience to maintain that open mindset. Even if you do end up staying with Brimstone for the next decade, right? At least maintain the mindset that, like, hey, it is an option for me to just take a sabbatical year and go join Peace Corps. Like, that is an option. And I think that's another lesson that Honduras did teach me, was that, like, dude, you can drop everything and do something crazy and you're gonna make it. Like, you're gonna survive. You're gonna come back in one piece and things are gonna be okay. You're gonna figure it out. And it may seem scary, but I promise you that fear will only go away by just putting one foot in front of the other and continue to go day by day and just solving each problem as it comes. So not only to you, looking you here in your eyes, saying this to you, like, please maintain that life, that mindset. To anyone who's listening out there, like, if you do have a conventional mindset, like, challenge yourself to open it up a little bit. Challenge yourself to really at least engage in the thought process of exploring what scares you. And if you already are doing that, continue to maintain the mindset of at least mentally diving into your fears or taking risk. I don't know, man. I really feel like I don't know much about life, and a lot of the shit I say here on this podcast is me just shooting the shit and spitballing what's coming in my mind. But I really feel like in my 30 rotations around the sun that I have had, that, like, pushing the limit of what you think is possible and what you think is scary is, like, a really good way to guide your day-to-day existence. So I don't know. I really hope you continue to think that way at the very least. At least continue to entertain that thought. And then I also want to close out by saying, dude, like, I'm super appreciative of all my friends. And I'm so incredibly fortunate to have the people in my life that I do. And they all hold a very special part. And you do hold this incredibly special place in my heart, man, as, like, not only a good friend, but at this point, especially because of your relationship with my sister, like, you're a brother. You're a member of the fucking family. And I feel so fucking lucky to have you in my life. And I think sometimes I haven't always been the greatest friend. And I feel incredibly fortunate that you're still here with me, right? That I've had the chance to come up with you on your 30th birthday to meet your family. And I don't know, man, I just look forward to continue to having you in my life in whatever capacity that is, even if, we're not living together or we're not in each other's physical presence on a day-to-day basis, man. I don't know. I look forward to fucking you being at my funeral.
We'll do it again when we're 75.
Yeah, brother. Really, man, I love you to death. And, like, seriously, thank you for being who you are, because you're fucking inspiration to me. You keep my, like, fire burning. Seriously. So thank you, dude. And thank you for doing this interview.
Well, yeah, thanks for having me here, man.
All right, bro.
This has been a blast.
I
didn't know what it was going to be like.
I was gonna cycle in.